All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm happy to welcome back Tom Nichols, staff writer for The Atlantic, also Professor Emeritus of National Security Affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. Tom Nichols, great to see you, man.
Hey, Matt, good to see you again.
Good timing. We booked this, I don't know, a week or two ago, and now we have this Pete Hegseth speech. Wouldn't this normally be at the Pentagon? Why at Quantico?
Well, normally it doesn't apply here because normally you don't call in 800 plus generals and admirals and have them all meet in the same place. That's what teleconferencing is for. That's what, VTCs are for. You don't, this costs millions of dollars to fly these people all around the world. So, where would you hold it? Well, you had to hold it on a base where you could provide security, and they were shuttling these guys in and out of buses. The whole thing was crazy. But where would you normally hold this? Normally, you would hold it in your office, looking at a video conferencing thing, and do it from there. But Hegseth wanted to show, and I think that's the point of this meeting, that he could, flex and order people to travel.
All right. Well, I want to play you some clips. I've got 4, and we'll just stop each time, and I'll have you respond. The first clip, and these are probably out of order. I've just sort of culled from some of the highlights or lowlights, depending on your perspective.
The way the speech was, Matt, it would be hard to tell what was in order and what wasn't. So,
indeed. Well, all right. So here he is, generally talking about the warrior ethos.
We've simply not done that. The military has been forced by foolish and reckless politicians to focus on the wrong things. In many ways, this speech is about fixing decades of decay. Some of it obvious, some of it hidden. Or as the chairman has put it, we are clearing out the debris, removing the distractions, clearing the way for leaders to be leaders. You might say we're ending the war on warriors. I heard someone wrote a book about that. For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. We've pretended that combat arms and non-combat arms are the same thing. We've weeded out so-called toxic leaders under the guise of double-blind psychology assessments, promoting risk-averse, go-along-to-get-along conformists instead. You name it, the department did it. Foolish and reckless political leaders set the wrong compass heading, and we lost our way. We became the woke department, but not anymore.
I don't know. What do you make of that, Tom?
It's idiotic. What does that even mean? We're the woke department. I'm sorry. Was the point of that excerpt to say that we're going to make the DoD safe for toxic leadership again? There is just this. I mean, in part, I think what you're hearing in this is the cri de coeur, the anger of every passed over officer, everybody who's ever been disciplined, everybody who never, made the grade for some promotion or specialization that they wanted. I mean, it's just, it like everything else with this administration, it's just kind of dripping with grievance about something. But, one thing that is striking about this is Hegseth is talking to 3 and 4 stars who for 15 years were part of, creating everything he's talking about. And when he talks about, this, we've become terrible and it's everything. We're not a great I think a lot of the people in there who are combat veterans would disagree with him.
We sort of did a back and forth of applauding them for their service and also fat shaming them. Here, let me play this clip. Speaking of
with
that.
Physical fitness and appearance. If the Secretary of War can do regular, hard PT, so can every member of our joint force. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test. And as the chairman said, yes, there is no PT test. But today, at my direction, every member of the Joint Force at every rank is required to take a PT test twice a year, as well as meet height and weight requirements twice a year, every year of service. Also today, at my direction, every warrior across our Joint Force is required to do PT every duty day. Should be common sense. I mean, most units do that already.
Is this a thing? I don't think I've ever seen a fat general. Maybe they exist. I don't know. Is it a problem?
You know, remember, generals are often, pushing 60. They get a little, I guess I'm going to speak up for fat guys here. General Leslie Groves, one of the godfathers of the Manhattan Project, was teased for being pudgy. There are fat generals and admirals, but the point of a general or a 4-star admiral is not to be doing chin-ups. It's to be helping the secretary and the president direct the national strategy of the United States, keep our forces safe, keep our weapons at top readiness, be ready to defend the country. This is, I think a lot of what you
Donald
saw
Trump,
today,
by
Matt,
this definition, Donald Trump is not qualified to be a senior ranking military
he's
official.
including all ranks across the force. He's going to have to exclude commander-in-chief. But I think the point of this was to create clips for Fox News, because this was all, no longer a woke department, and, FA, FO have, it was performative nonsense. And I imagine a lot of the people in that room wondered why they had to drag their asses, through 10 time zones to get to sit through that in person.
But we might be lucky if it's just performative, right? I mean, it's possible that you could be a highly qualified and valuable general that is performing an important function, say like overseeing the Manhattan Project, that would be drummed out of the military because you can't do enough pull-ups. Like, isn't that?
That's not how it works. Listen, I knew when I worked in the, of course, I worked at the Naval War College. When I knew, lieutenant commanders and commanders who had to, lose a few pounds of weight for their PT tests. Pretty rare to have somebody drum you out of a senior rank or drum you out of the military at all for that kind of health problem. Instead, a doctor, and you make a plan. And I suspect that by the time any of this actually gets to meaning anything, Hegseth will be gone. But this is.
Well, that sounds like an optimistic.
It's possible. It's possible, just to make the point, Hegseth's going to pick some general who's 20 pounds past his prime and fire him just to make a great news story and deflect from what's going on in the world. But people, look, everybody in the military struggles with PT now and then. The other part of this that struck me was where he wants everybody to do PT every day. When I taught at the War College, we had an admiral for a while who was totally like this. He was a big rah, stay deployable, war fighting kind of guy. And what it really happened is that at 8 o'clock in the morning, guys would be stumbling into my seminar with their hair still wet and, exhausted and falling through their collars because they'd had to get up at 5 in the morning and go play intramural basketball or something to make their PT quota for the day. I think a lot of these are things that are going to fall by the wayside when we get back to actually, defending the country.
So one of the things that Hegseth apparently wants to get rid of is our anti-bullying policies. Let me play this.
The definition of toxic has been turned upside down, and we're correcting that. That's why today, at my direction, we're undertaking a full review of the department's definitions of so-called toxic leadership, bullying, and hazing, to empower leaders to enforce standards without fear of retribution or second guessing.
You're damn right I ordered the code red.
Damn right I did. My existence, while grotesque to you, saves lives. It's inane. It's based on. I knew when I worked in the, for the military, I knew leaders like Hegseth come in and say everything you're doing is wrong. We're just no one's ever given this any thought but me. No one's ever thought about bullying or toxic leadership until I thought of it 10 minutes ago. This is classic case, as some of my friends would say, this is classic case of, being a very eager major who assumes that no colonel or captain above them has ever thought about anything. There's an old joke in the military that the three things a ship commander hates hearing is a lieutenant who says, "Hey, skipper, watch this." A lieutenant commander who says, "I've been thinking," and an ensign who says, "In my experience." And so, this was just classic. No one's thought of. Everyone is stupid but me is what really came out of that. And I think there were a lot of men and women in that audience who thought, I was thinking about this stuff, while I made my bones while you were dating cheerleaders, as Mo Green would say. But some of these people were officers when Pete Hegseth was in high school. So,
all right,
just embarrassing.
Last clip is consistent with the bullying thing. This is about people complaining. No more dropping the dime on anybody.
We are overhauling an inspector general process, the IG, that has been weaponized, putting complainers, ideologues, and poor performers in the driver's seat. We're doing the same with the equal opportunity and military equal opportunity policies, the EO and MEO at our department. No more frivolous complaints, no more anonymous complaints, no more repeat complainants, no more smearing reputations, no more endless waiting, no more legal limbo, no more sidetracking careers, no more walking on eggshells.
No more anonymous complaints or repeat complainers. So what if you have a valid complaint? What if you witness something horrific? You don't want to be a complainer, though, right? You don't want to be a tattletale.
Well, there's so much underlying this. This isn't first of all, I think it's a message that he's been consistent on, which is about women. Doesn't want to hear from them, doesn't want to hear their complaints, doesn't want them in the force. And about complaints about racism. Considering he just got rid of the beard exception for a problem that almost overwhelmingly afflicts black men. This is his way of saying.
Tell me, what's the problem? What's it?
Well, that there are men in the military who get exceptions to have a beard because they have a condition that causes very painful skin conditions if they shave. Okay. And most of the people afflicted by that condition, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's a legitimate exception to the no beards rule. Most of the men that afflicts are black men. And Hegseth said, we're not going to give that exception anymore. If you can't shave, you have to get out of the military. Well, remarkably, that seems to only fall on a particular part of the U.S. military. And I think, this is part of it, to saying, if you don't like it, don't complain. We don't want you talking to the IG. We don't want to hear about, your toxic command structure or your command environment. Every year, I filled out a survey every year, command climate. And Hegseth saying, I don't want to hear any of this stuff. Now, again, he can say this from a stage, but then that's going to have to be turned into actual policy to say, literally, to get rid of, email addresses where people can file complaints. I mean, this is really shutting down an important source of information within any organization. Every organization needs a place where people can say, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And
sometimes the problem could be like, having to actually do with national security or something serious.
Oh yeah,
that will make you more lethal if you don't fix the problem.
And that
it's not just like frivolous necessarily, or
right, and that can
having
factor
to do
right
with...
into toxic leadership. I mean, if you have a bad leader in a military organization, people can get killed.
So let me ask you this, Tom, because I on one hand, I could see a scenario where the military's gotten too soft and, you're not allowed to put anybody in line anymore. You have to be nice to everybody all the time, and that's possible. And then on the other hand, I think you could stifle dissent to such a degree that you're not getting feedback from the people who are on the front lines, literally. Is there actually a danger that our military has become too woke and too soft, and that maybe Hegseth actually has a coherent vision of fixing a real problem?
That's as they said in My Cousin Vinny, that is a well thought out and lucid objection. Overruled. The answer to your question is no. What is the evidence? What problem does Hegseth think he's fixing? What's the evidence here that the U.S. military is soft and woke and weak and can't do? It's always such a contradiction. Trump and Hegseth talk about the most lethal fighting force, America's military, greatest in the world, and then we get this. But you're all soft and weak and woke, and I mean, it just makes no sense. And
meanwhile, the Russian military are very tough, right, and strong and masculine.
The Russian military are being ground into hamburger because of poor training, incompetent officers, crappy equipment. I mean, this is, but they're not woke. And I think the other thing about this, when Hegseth says no more smears, that's him. That's him personally responding to the things that were raised when he was nominated, and to the stories that are leaking out. I don't know if you saw yesterday, but already there's stuff leaking out about, he's having a meltdown in the Pentagon, and, he's manic and he's all over the place. That when he says no more anonymous smears, he means against me, Pete Hegseth.
Yeah. It's sort of like the way that Trump's presidency is like 90% about retribution, about what happened to him, in the sense of that there was lawfare. Like Hegseth's administration at the Pentagon seems largely based on setting up a premise that would absolve him from anything he might have been accused from as well.
And also, stop laughing at me.
Yeah.
There is a kind of stop laughing at me. Don't you roll your eyes at me. I know what you guys are doing. It's the same problem Kash Patel has at the FBI, where, you have career people who know their jobs, career soldiers at the Pentagon, career FBI agents. They're looking and they're saying, these guys are clowns. What are we supposed to do? And the military, of course, has to sit there respectfully and obey the lawful orders of their superiors through the Secretary of Defense. And I think what Hegseth is trying to do is to say, I know you'll obey my orders, but damn it, I want to show you that I'm really in charge. You will, what is that? I guess we're moving one to another cultural reference here to South Park. Respect my authority. Authority. Yeah. And I think, it's just this kind of cringy, I demand your respect. I mean, and Trump had the same problem when he came out, and he basically was like, please clap. He pulled the Jeb Bush moment, please clap.
At the end of Hegseth's, I didn't upload this because it won't translate to audio, but for video, you should go watch it. At the end of Hegseth's remarks, you could tell he wanted applause, and it was crickets for a couple seconds, and then
he had a couple of laugh lines in there where he kind of waited for the applause light or the laugh line to go on, and there was just, tumbleweeds.
It was a little
and
uncomfortable.
Sort of moved on.
It was crickets.
Look, they don't. I think anecdotally, I think it's clear that they don't. That the military just doesn't have a lot of respect for this guy. He's the least qualified Secretary of Defense in history. They respect his authority. They will follow his orders. They are good servants of the Constitution, but they don't have to like the guy, and they don't have to think, that he knows what he's doing.
Well, since we mentioned Russia and Ukraine a few seconds ago, let me segue there. Donald Trump seems to have changed his tune, at least rhetorically, now saying that Ukraine can win the war and regain all the territory that they've lost since the last 15 years or something like that. On one hand, I think we should probably welcome this change of heart. On the other hand, he's so capricious that who knows what he'll be saying next week. But What do you make of this? Should we be celebrating or
Well,
what?
what's our position on Ukraine? If you're only listening to us on audio, I'm pointing to my watch and saying could be could be anything at this moment. I think though, and I wrote about this in the Atlantic a few days ago. My guess is that Trump has said, okay, there's nothing in this for me. It's making me look stupid. Putin's humiliating me on a daily basis. I'm not going to get a Nobel Prize for this. So this is my way of washing my hands of everything and saying, fine, we'll sell weapons to Europe. Europe will give weapons to Ukraine. Ukrainians will keep fighting Russians. And in the meantime, I'm going to go normalize relations with Putin. Because the other part of washing your hands of this is to take the entire issue of Ukraine and just push it off your desk. And to say, I don't care who wins. I'm friends with that. He said at one point in that statement, he said something like, I wish both countries well. No, that's, you don't
moral leadership, strong moral leadership.
You don't sit there in September 1939 and say, hey, I wish Germany and Poland both well. Yeah. This is not my issue. But I do think that's a way for him to say, fine, I can't affect this. So now I'm going to start doing deals with Russia and lifting tariffs and trying to make money and enrich myself. Right. I mean, I keep going back to why is he president? He ran for president this time to stay out of jail, get revenge on his enemies, and line his pockets.
But he did say he was going to bring down grocery prices on day one and end the Ukraine-Russia war on day one.
And the Ukraine-Russia war is now at the most... Putin has launched some of the biggest attacks of the war since Trump said that. And coincidentally, grocery prices are at record highs again.
And I think in both cases, he later said, I'm just now finding out that things are more complicated than I thought they were,
Yeah, that's one of his things, right? He did that about healthcare, and then he said, who knew? He said, I thought ending a war in Ukraine would be easy, but it turns out it's pretty complicated. Really? Maybe that's why we have a National Security Council and professional diplomats and long-serving career analysts at the CIA. Maybe they can help you, Mr. President. But of course, he has neutralized and decimated the National Security Council. But by the way, Matt, an interesting thing about that, we're just, the deep state, get rid of the NSC. The NSC is the president's organization. It's a White House organization. It's there to serve him. And he has completely obliterated it because he just doesn't, he obliterated it more than he obliterated those Iranian nuclear weapons because he doesn't want anybody to be a smarter guy in the room or to tell him that he's wrong about anything. But that's really handicapping. I mean, I can understand him saying, look, I don't want to talk to the CIA. They've got their own institutional bias. A lot of presidents have felt that way about state or CIA or defense. The National Security Council, those are your guys. Those are your hand-picked people.
So we're recording this Tuesday morning. Yeah, okay. Tuesday morning. I believe the government is set to run out of funding or whatever at midnight, which means that unless something dramatically changes in the next several hours, we will be in a government shutdown. I'm writing a piece right now, Tom, basically arguing that, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are not wartime consigliaries. And even though on the merits, they definitely have a point about why should we continue to fund a government for someone who's doing so many really egregious things, attacking democracy, and simultaneously is not negotiating honestly with us, with all the rescission. So I think they have a point, but I also think that they're just destined to lose. I don't think that they can execute a messaging war against the likes of Donald Trump and JD Vance. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think for them, it's no win. I mean, part of the problem, and this is what Democrats, I think, have always railed about, and justly so, is that Trump can do anything he wants, and his base never deserts it. He can drive to a farm in Pennsylvania It's the old shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue thing. He could drive to a farm in Pennsylvania and burn it to the ground. And then you can talk to that farmer who's going to say, well, if it had to be done, I guess it had to be done, Um, and whereas, Democrats function much more like a normal political party these days. So, will Trump's people hold him responsible? They kind of did in 2018. There were people that were pretty angry during the shutdown that were even Trump voters. And I suspect that Jeffries and Schumer are betting this time around that Trump's support, he's at historically low popularity, and that his support will take a hit and that people will blame, as they should. I mean, can we just point something out here? If there's a government shutdown and the White House, the Senate, and the House are all controlled by one party, there can only be one party in charge of the shutdown.
Okay, but wait a second, though, Tom. Wait a second. Because, number one, Republicans are simply trying to pass a clean CR. They're trying to just keep the government funding at basically the same level it's been. And they actually do need Democrats. Republicans can't pass this because in the Senate, it's going to take 60 votes. So they literally do need Democratic votes. So doesn't that complicate your point?
It does.
Which otherwise
it does. But I am far less willing to buy into that narrative that you just went into of, hey, we're just trying to pass a clean CR and we're just trying to keep the government open. That is imputing good faith to Johnson and the Republicans. That I think is unwarranted. I think where the problem comes in is that where when you hear somebody like Jeffries or Schumer talk about this, they're not happy warriors. They're not coming out and saying, here are all the terrible things. They say, well, we just want to extend healthcare mandates and that's it. And it's like, that's an important thing. But it doesn't, I don't think it makes the case to the American people about why this kind of, chicanery with the budget can't go on every single time Donald Trump faces a budget. So I think in that sense, I probably agree with you that more of this is going to slosh back onto the Democrats than they expect.
So I do want to amend something or push back slightly on something you said. You said they're not happy warriors. And when I think of a happy warrior, I think of someone like a Ronald Reagan. But I don't think that's close, but I don't think that's exactly what Democrats need right now. I think what they need is someone who relishes the battle, like a Newt Gingrich, actually. Someone who enjoys fighting. And that's definitely not. I mean, so Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, I mean, I don't think they want to fight. I think they'd rather govern. I think that they're much more. They're talking like they communicate in a style that's like they're talking to C-SPAN callers or fellow senators. They're just not playing the same game. And I know now they're trying to a little bit. Like Hakeem Jeffries tweeted out, Donald Trump truthed or put out on social media this really insulting meme or GIF showing Schumer, and then Jeffries wearing like a sombrero or something. And then Jeffries replied like, that's a fake picture. Here's a real one. And it's a picture of Trump and Jeffrey Epstein together. So, I mean, like, I'm not saying they don't have any game, but it's almost like they're playing, like checkers against Trump's chess or something.
I don't think that's fair because it assumes that Trump is playing chess. All
right, bad analogy, but still.
But I think
see where I'm going.
And I think what they're doing is they're trying not to sink. Like they can't do. Only Gavin Newsom has really gotten away with that right now, right? To say, look, I can be just as offensive as you can, and make you look stupid in the meantime. The other guy who punches back pretty hard is J.B. Pritzker. But he's a governor. He's not in Washington. I think that I understand the kind of institutionalist tendency to say, we can't just get down in the muck. The reason we don't have a Democratic Newt Gingrich is because we're Democrats and we don't want a Newt Gingrich. But I think there is a kind of timidity in the way they talk. When Schumer was on over the weekend and saying, I'm pleading with the president, I'm begging the president to cut. I mean, Congress is the Article I power. Spending originates in the House. Alyssa Slotkin actually brought this up the other day. It's like, look, this is the Constitution. This isn't some, innovation. This isn't some, improvisation that we're coming up with at the last minute. And I think this constantly almost apologetic, kind of head shaking, sorrow more than anger thing, it just isn't working. And I don't know the right answer to this, because I think your point about Newt Gingrich, I don't think you can go there. But I think, I think that Reaganite happy warrior stuff really worked. I mean, I think, and not just with Reagan. I mean, I think Obama got away with that as well, of saying, hope and change and, lowering the seas. And a lot of it was, as vaporous as the kind of stuff Reagan said about morning in America, but it worked. And I think people want to have something to believe in that way.
Well, the reason I picked Gingrich, and I mean, I think maybe what they need is a combination of Newt and Nancy Pelosi. Her for her message discipline and control over the caucus, which Gingrich didn't really have, and Gingrich for his energy and panache and vision, revolutionary vision. But I don't think it's fair to compare congressional leaders with a presidential candidate like an Obama or even a Trump, because obviously it's a different skill set. I mean, these are people who got to where they are by kind of climbing the greasy pole of inside, caucus politics. But that's why I think Gingrich is a good example. I mean, they need someone who has that fire.
Or here's an alternative. I agree with you. And I think the comparison to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, to me, the thing about Newt was he had this energy. He would have loved this fighting. He would have seen it as fun. Whereas a normal person would see it as like, oh my gosh, I guess I have to do this.
But let's not revise history here. Gingrich wore out his own welcome with his own caucus pretty fast.
Oh yeah,
there were a lot of people who got tired of that kind of performative nonsense pretty quickly. And his time as speaker wasn't that long.
No, but I think and he lost, and he also lost a shutdown battle with Bill Clinton, of course.
Well, I was going to say, you're talking about shutdown battles, and who's the guy that actually, screwed the pooch on a shutdown battle? Is the guy you're saying, you're holding up here. But the other kind of Democrat thing that they need, and maybe this is just my old Massachusetts Irish, bias kicking in. Maybe you need another Tip O'Neill. That you need a guy who, a muscular, a politically muscular, O'Neill was a muscular, an old guy like me, but, politically muscular speaker who says this is how it's going to be. And these are the bills we're going to pass and the bills we're not going to pass. You haven't really seen that. I mean, it's funny that both parties believe that they're fighting against an elite that has limited democracy. And really, if you look at everything that's happened to us in the past 20 years, it's because we are more democratic, small d democratic than ever. That, there are no elites controlling what happens in the House. This is all just id and, direct screen. The representative from the 8th nowhere district is now just a megaphone for whatever a bunch of people said, at a town meeting.
But the problem is, Tom, that so Donald Trump has had a decade-long campaign of quieting disparate voices and purging anybody who doesn't, follow him. The way that speakers typically dominated, was structurally. I mean, if you got out of line, Tip O'Neill could basically shut off you going on TV. There was no Twitter. There was no streaming. There was no Fox News or whatever. He could shut you off from going on TV because you're probably a backbencher anyway. He could make sure that you don't get any pork barrel funding, no bridges in your district. He could make sure that the DCCC doesn't spend any money to help you. I mean, he had so many.
You crossed him at your peril.
Yeah. But now, think of like a John Boehner. Or even a Paul Ryan, they had almost none of those carrots and sticks to whip. So it's almost like this, unfair battle where we're asking Schumer and Jeffries to go up against Trump, and it's totally asymmetric.
But as you pointed out, I mean, I think you're right, Matt. These are not wartime concierges.
Yeah.
They are still. I think Schumer even less so. I mean, I think Jeffries has a lot of restrictions on him just structurally because of the nature of the House. But Schumer, I think, creatures of the Senate, that cooperation and comity and negotiation, are the path forward. And the problem is that you have, and this is what undermined people like Boehner. I mean, you and I both are old enough to remember this, and that once you have a bunch of guys to say, listen, we don't actually care about passing legislation. We don't care if you send anything back to our district. We don't care if you don't build a bridge. All we care about is being on Fox, winning our primary, getting reelected, and having somebody bring us our coffee every morning. Once you've detached being a politician from achieving anything, you get the situation that we're in now. And I think Democrats are still very old school. My job is to go to Washington. It's to make sure that, a bridge gets built in my district, and that, the port gets shared around, and bills get passed, and so on. You have a Republican Party that has gone from where it was when you and I were younger, of, Reaganism saying government, big government is the problem, right? You need a smaller, more efficient, more streamlined and effective government, to nihilism, to this kind of, anarchist kind of approach of saying government shouldn't exist at all. It shouldn't do anything. Any day that we're all, locked up and not passing a bill and not doing anything is a good day. It's hard to maintain that coalition because those people are kept in power. And I guess we're in heated agreement about this because it's how it puts the Democrats at a disadvantage. All any Republican has to think about is keeping about 20 or 30% of the base happy to survive a primary, because the districts have become so red and so blue because of gerrymandering, because of clustering, because of people moving, any number of things that have happened over 30 years. And so they just don't care if the speaker says, well, I won't, you need to, moderate your rhetoric and get on board with me on this bill. And the guy says, I don't answer to you. I answer to Fox News and to 20% of my district.
Indeed. Well, we will keep an eye on it, but I suspect we will be in a shutdown, and eventually Democrats are going to have to cave. And the question is whether they can score any messaging political points. Like, for example, if Democrats are able, they end up having to cave and eventually vote to reopen the government, but in the process, they've alerted every American that their, ACA's, the price for healthcare is going to go up. Then maybe it's worth it, but we'll see. Before I get you out of here, Tom, I should always ask, anything I missed, anything you wanted to address? What do you want to leave us with?
Well, this is where I wave my hands and say all this, no, I think, the big stories this week are going to be that this bizarre jamboree in Quantico, and that probably by tomorrow, the government's going to be shut down for the first time since, the last time Trump shut it down. Which is,
right,
again, I'm just going to, foot stomp this one more time and say, it is strange to think that we're even discussing whether this would be stuck on Trump, considering that the last 3 shutdowns were all Trump shutdowns. And yet, here we are.
Well, there's, on one hand, Republicans tend to get blamed for shutdowns because they're the anti-government party, just in terms of perception. On the other hand, the party asking for something not related usually gets blamed. And so I think Democrats, that means Democrats will get blamed because, maybe the Affordable Care Act might be important, but it's not directly related to.
Well, here's where we end up playing chess, right? It's you put stuff into a CR that's bait. Each side does this to see if they can draw the other one into the foul. And I think this is going to be. I think this is just going to be. I mean, healthcare. It is one of those things that does break through the noise for most Americans. The other thing we can never be sure of, before we're out of here, is that if there is a shutdown, Donald Trump can always make it worse by talking. So you never know who's going to get pinned with. I mean, remember the last time he got stuck with the shutdown because he went on TV and said, "It's my shutdown. I'm proud to own it." You know, which is normally not what you say during a shutdown if you don't want responsibility for it. But you know,
he can definitely do it again.
But do it again.
All right, follow him on Twitter, X at Radio Free Tom. Read him at The Atlantic. Tom Nichols, always a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Good to see you.